In a world mostly filled with wastelands, life is scarce, constantly threatened by deadly predators and a harsh, empty environment. But a few rare spots offer refuge from this hard lifestyle. These places are usually underground and had many resources. These locations allowed bugs to form small communities and tribes where they would be safe from the dangers of the outside world and they could thrive. This is the story of all the kingdoms we know in the Hollow Knight world, and one of these underground locations will later become Pharlom. Pharlom history stretches throughout hundreds of years, perhaps even more, so we are not certain about the order of how things happen, and many of these events are shrouded in mystery and open to interpretation, meaning this video will be full of speculation, so take everything with a grain of salt. Let's begin with the story of how Pharlom came to be what is today. Pharlom seems to be inside a mountain, maybe even a volcano since it has lava at the bottom. I think that because this place has two exits. One is around the middle level of the map and one at the very top, unlike in Hallownest where the wasteland could be reached only at the highest places, and there is also a place called Mount Fae, and even that is shorter than the top of Pharlom. The oldest area in this place seems to be the Abyss, that is situated at the very bottom, beneath the lava. In Hallownest the Abyss was built by the ancient civilization that was formed of very large bugs, but in Pharlom we don't find any corpses outside of the weavers. We will talk about that later. Only a few creatures seems to live here that seems to not eat or sleep, so we don't know who created the structures that are here. The main thing that is found in the Abyss is the Void, a dangerous substance that seems to want to consume everything it enters in contact. The Void can be used to create weird creatures using molds, and it has a lot of power. We don't know how the Void came to be. The shades in the first game are described as an imprint left by the ones who died. An NPC describes them as regrets, and it looks like the Void can be only found in places where many bugs live. So it looks like the regret of the bugs that died is accumulated over time and it eventually creates the Void, but there is no clear evidence for that. One of the tribes that lived in Pharlom had a fixation and fascination about the Void and used it for various practices. This tribe was formed by the Snail Shamans. The Snail Shamans are an old, powerful tribe that can be found in both Hallownest and Pharlom. They have intimate knowledge about the soul, a substance that is found in every living bug. They can collect and manipulate this substance and create different spells such as the Vengeful Spirit, Hallowing Wraiths, and many more. They seem to also be able to manipulate the Void to some small extent, combining the soul items and spells with the Void, creating more powerful variants. The Snail Shamans used to visit the Abyss where they will experiment and study the Void, so they set up their home and made a chapel nearby at the top of the Moss Grotto, a place filled with moss and plant life. Most of the fauna here was born from the moss mothers, who made lots of nests around and can breed and multiply fairly fast, but they seem to be more wild and do not possess high intelligence. Nearby is a lava zone filled with lots of resources and valuable ores, with many applications. This area has little life in it, only a few wild bugs live around the lava, such as the termite. But the lava helped the nearby area flourish. The far fields is filled with grass, plants and bugs. Here are lots of updrafts of wind from the lava nearby. The entire Farfields and the Hunter's March were once a single big area that was the territory of the Scar tribe, a huge group of powerful ants hunters that were trained from birth. Even the young ones did go for hunting. They were ruled by the Scar singer Carmelita. She was the strongest member of the tribe, and with her beautiful song and graceful skills she united all the Scars under her command. And it seems that the Scars were the strongest group before the kingdom of Pharlom was built. Their domain has lots of structures made of bones. Even their armors, weapons and traps are made of bones, showing how skilled they are in hunting and killing prey and enemies. Above there was an area filled with life and vegetation. This place was called Verdania. Unlike the Moss Grotto, here lived intelligent bugs. They lived in peace and only attacked those who invaded their territory. Verdania was ruled by the two princes, known as the Clover Dances. They were beloved by their subjects for their grace and for their dancing fighting style. The Shellwood area was mostly a barren area that was filled with plant life and even plant creatures by Nylet. She was the heart of Shellwood, so she was connected with all the living things in the area. She maintained the wood's fragile order, allowing bugs to safely pass across the area. Next to it was a huge coral area filled with water and life. At the top was the Coral Tower, where Crush King Khan and his army resided. His reign leaned heavily on the military power. He had hundreds of soldiers that were trained from a young age, and they were very loyal to the king. They even had military ranks, battle formations like front and back lines, and all that military stuff. This is probably the reason why their domain was so large, and it looks like they wanted to expand even more. In my name, conquer all, is one of the king's lines. For anyone who was not a fighter or was weak would probably find him a hard ruler. The king had the ability to command the coral crust, so he was probably the one that made a lot of the structures around here. Above was the Mount Fae, which seems to be untouched by anyone to this day, probably because of the very cold environment that will turn anyone who sits there for too long into a crystal statue. And lastly, there was the Bilewater area, that was likely fused at this time with the putrefied ducks. This area was a network of caves filled with small waterfalls and many water pools everywhere. Here lives the Steel King tribe. Grohl the Great was the chief of the tribe, and they looked to live peacefully and chill for the most part. This was more or less how this place looked once. All the area seems to be separate from each other and the tribes looks to live in isolation. But all of that would change when the Grandmother of Silk arrived in these lands. The Grandmother of Silk is a pale being. Pale beings are godlike creatures with immense power, and it seems to be in their nature to have a desire to be worshipped. In the first game, it is said that worms, a type of pale beings, are known to build kingdoms and rule them until they fall. And in Silksong, this trait looks to also apply to the pale beings in general. I mean, if you want to be worshipped, you will need to be someone important. All the pale beings possess some sort of special abilities, and it seems that the Silk Mother had the power to create silk, a material made from soul. This ability seems to be unique to the Silk Mother. All the other creatures that can create and control silk are made or descendants from the Silk Mother. The Silk Mother wanted to make this entire area her domain and to make everyone who lived there her subjects that will devote and worship her. Some of the bugs accepted her and dedicated their lives to her service, but the majority opposed her rule, devotion or destruction. These are the only fates the pale beings allowed, so for anyone who did stand against their rule ended up being destroyed, with little to no trace of their former domain. This was the fate for all the four main powers that ruled these lands before her. King Khan and Carmelita opposed her rule entirely and stood against her. I'm not really sure in what order the next events unfolded, so be prepared for a lot of speculation. In order to deal with the groups that opposed her, the Grandmother of Silk needed some help. She needed much more silk for her conquest than she could ever produce. So she attached her silk to a species known as Pharlids, small spiders found in tight caves that attack anyone that passes by them. With her power, the Silk Mother evolved the Pharlids into what will be later called the Weavers. The Silk Mother called them Divine and her daughters. They had the same ability to produce and manipulate silk as her, but at a much smaller scale. The Weavers and the Mother used the silk to create weapons and abilities. They even used the silk to manipulate objects and also to control bugs like puppets. With her daughters and new followers, she fought against the major factions that oppose her. King Khan and his army tried to fight them, but when it was clear the battle was unwinnable, many soldiers fled in fear, and they eventually got defeated. The Coral Tower alongside the majority of the coral area was completely destroyed, and what was once a beautiful area filled with creatures and rivers had now dried out, leaving only dust and sands behind. The whole place was reduced to a barren area with only sandstorm blowing through it. The king died on his throne surrounded by his most loyal guards. This area is now known as the Sands of Karak, and a big portion of it was separated and turned into the Blasted Steppes. Karaka was the name of the most common soldier, so the name suggests how this area is filled with the remains of the army. Only one soldier had remained alive, watching and guarding the border of the domain. There were some coral remains around these areas, and some bugs fused with the corals around and used them as masks to fight and defend. Nylet and Shellwood seems to have accepted the Silk Mother rule, and they were integrated into her kingdom. Nylet allowed them to build structures around to some extent and grant them safe passage through her domain, so Shellwood remained mostly unchanged. Nylet died at some point for an unknown reason, and a shrine was made into her honor. The shrine looks to be made by the ones from the Citadel based on the similar design, so it seems that they have respected her. Seth was tasked to forever guard and protect the shrine from anyone who tried to pass by. Out of all the Silk Mother's enemies, the Scar tribe was the greatest challenge and resisted her conquest the longest, but they too were ultimately defeated. The remaining Scars and the Queen retreated and went into hiding. They no longer had a nest or a home, it was taken by the Silk Mother. They only had one small area that they were roam around, known as the Hunter's March, where they built a statue in the memory of their only leader. But the Queen Carmelita was still alive, even to this day, hidden deep in the far fields, forever cursing the Silk Mother for what she did to them. Over time she grew old and her strength faded away. Now her tribe cannot even recognize her song. The Snail Shaman shamans also went into hiding inside their chapel in the Moss Grotto. Because of the Silk Mother, it seems that no snail shaman managed to visit the void after this point. Now they had to hide themselves with cloaks to not be recognized and killed. Some of them even infiltrated into her new kingdom disguised as regular bugs or pilgrims to gather informations in hope that they will one day remove her from this realm. Around the war and conquest times, it is likely that the Sinner's Road was made. It was built over a portion of Greymore, who submitted to the Silk Mother. The Sinner's Road is a place where the sinners were locked for a time. Now this place was repurposed for something else, but we will get there later. It is possible that anyone who was against the Silk Mother was called a sinner, and those who were not killed were brought here and caged, probably as a display to show the others what will happen if they don't submit to her. Since I've mentioned the Sinner's Road, let's also discuss about the new place where the mother locked the sinners. The slab was built near Mount Fae, probably to torture the sinners even more with the terrible cold out there. Any sinners from the Citadel will be captured and sent here. Well, they will be wrapped up in rags and imprisoned. No matter how much they try to penance, nobody will care, so anyone who is sent here will remain here for their entire life. This was also the case for the jailers. In the past, the jailers were just some regular prisoners that committed a sin against the Citadel that was so grave that their offsprings and the offsprings of their offsprings carried the guild with them still. But it was so long ago that no one even remember what it was. To penance for that grave sin, they received an offer to serve this place as the jailers, that will capture and guard the sinners. This was their only hope of absolution. But that day never came, and both the jailers and the prisoners were stuck in that place. The brood mother was fed by the others to grow and lay lots of eggs, so the slab will continue to have the jailers and the cycle to continue. The place became so filthy to the point that even the jailers couldn't stand it anymore, and just look at them. They are the personification of filth. Despite being a dump area for anyone the Citadel didn't like, they equipped the jailers with a special sets of cages. The cages were covered in magic runes, which were so powerful that not even Hornet is able to escape from once captured. So it looks like the jailers were very efficient in capturing sinners. There were still a few more groups that were against the Silk Mother, but for the most part she got what she wanted. It's not clear how this place looked after the conquest. There are some hints that bugs used to worship the Silk Mother. The Weaver's purpose after the war was to sustain her light through their songs, probably meaning to spread her influence and religion around this land and make bugs come to bow and worship before the Silk Mother. It is possible that she had some early palace built at the top for her, but it doesn't seem to be anything like the version we have today. The Silk Mother wasn't able to enjoy her rule for too long because she was usurped by her own creations. Like I said, the Silk Mother was very cruel to those who stood against her, and that also applied to anyone who dared to betray her in any way. This was considered the greatest sin. She was kind of a control freak, and it looks like the Weavers feared this side of her. The Weavers were very skilled in using the silk to create different abilities and tools. One of them in particular stood out for her talent to create runes from silk. She eventually had found out the true origins of her kind. They were neither divine nor her daughters. She lied to them. The Weavers realized that they were just a tool for the Silk Mother, and if they will define her in any way, they will end up like the others or even worse. The Weaver with the runes confronted the Silk Mother, or more likely the mother found out about her betrayal and she was locked in the depths of the slabs for that, with probably the same runes that she made, and she remained there ever since. It is likely that these runes are also used on the slab cages, explaining it why they are so strong, and maybe they even are connected to the seals used in Hallownest, but there is no evidence for that other than the similar design. I guess the other weavers just evolved her technique over time. This event made it clear to all the weavers what fate would ultimately await them under the Silk Mother rule. So they plotted against her and made a plan to get rid of her. They used their silk and singing abilities to lull the mother to sleep and put her inside a giant cocoon that was placed at the top of her palace, hidden away from everyone. The problem was that the cocoon needed a big and constant source of song to keep the Silk Mother asleep and trapped there. For that, the weavers created a religious system and a citadel to work both as a cage for her and as a holy place for the future pilgrims. This is why you can see this cocoon symbol all over. It represents the Silk Mother, but nobody really knew what it actually meant, so for them it was just a symbol of the religion. In order to build this massive place to host all of the songs needed, they require lots of resources that could be found in the lava zone. So the deep docks were created, and bugs were sent there to mine, gather and transport these resources up to the Citadel. The Citadel hierarchy also had bring a very skillful ancient line of Forge Daughters from a distant place to the deep docks. The Forge Daughters were tasked to make tools, weapons and armors for the bugs in the Citadel, but the working conditions around there weren't that good. As you might imagine, working with lava and molten materials is quite dangerous. The bugs were equipped with heavy armor all over to protect them from the heat, explosions and potential ignition, but that didn't help that much, so deaths were pretty frequent here. On the top of that, the Citadels also tasked 4 brothers Cygnus and Gron with overseeing the workers and punishing anyone who failed to complete their assigned work. In order to actually build the Citadel of Song and establish the new religion, they were helped by 3 different groups: the Conductors, the Architects, and the Vault Keepers. The Conductors resided in the high halls, and they were responsible for the entire choir who would sing songs and praise to spread and maintain the religion. At the right wing of the Citadel was built the Whispering Vaults, where the Vault Keepers resided. They were tasked with collecting and storing knowledge and history of the Citadel. Their authority in Pharlom was second only to the Weavers. They had different ranks, such as the Lamp Bearer tasked to recover all scrolls, or Scroll Readers tasked to read and recall the near endless scrolls of praise. The Vault Keepers, just like the Conductors, had the role to spread and maintain the religion through sermons and leading prayers to the new acolytes in training and bugs in the Citadel. They also had the power to root out and condemn those who were not faithful enough, meaning they had the power to test and judge the bugs in the Citadel devotion, and if you are considered not devoted enough, well, you'll just enjoy a one-way trip to the slab. Probably that's why their authority was so high. A similar place to the Whispering Vaults was the Memorial, which was built to host the fauna and flora found throughout Pharlom, even from the areas that were destroyed, to commemorate what once was and to also conduct various experiments. Lastly, there were the Architects. The Architects were actually artificial beings created by the Weavers. Well, at least the ones that came after. It's not clear if the first Architect was also a mechanical being. My theory is that there was an original Architect and the other 11s were made to mimic that one and to continue the job. The first one is described as the most skillful one, and the others weren't able to replicate their skills. The Architects learned a lot of their skills and crafts from the Weavers, since they were experts on that kind of stuff. The Architects are the ones that created all the machines and automatons found in the Citadel. The Cogwork core was built in the heart of the Citadel, and from there all the machines in the Citadel were powered. But the main use of the core was to power up an automatic system to produce songs, so you know, they will need less pilgrims and they will have a sure and eternal way to produce songs. But maintaining this area proved to be even more dangerous than working in the deep docks, because of all the gears that were constantly moving around, and normal bugs proved to be very inefficient. To solve these problems, the Architect also created automatons out of steel and gears. The robots were used to build, repair and maintain the core. They also built robots that used steam to clean the place and guards to defend it. But the cogs and gears weren't enough to make the robots fully function for this complex task. So for that, the automatons were also stuffed with the silk of the Weavers, and since the silk is made from soul, these robots had some level of sentience. The Architects even created giant robots that were probably used for demolition or to build stuff more efficiently. We can find one of these robots in the deep docks that was probably used for excavation, but as far as we can tell, these were the only automatons that were sent in this area. So despite having robots, the bugs still had to work in these harsh conditions themselves. Finally, the hierarchy of the Citadel and possibly the Weavers wanted the Architects to make guards for the Citadel, the core and the cradle. The Sentinels were made by the first Architect and they were a masterpiece. They were powered up by a cog heart and they possessed almost the same level of sentience as a regular bug. Their role was to protect the residents of the Citadel from any unwanted intruders or from anyone who posed a threat to them. The only problem proved to be the royal guards, because in order to make them, the Architects would need a mold. Well, but that wasn't actually a problem, because the Citadel knew exactly from where to get that. Verdania and the Citadel were still in conflict, but one of the princes received a peace deal. If he turned himself in and agreed to be used as a mold, they would leave Verdania alone. His lover didn't like that idea, but he did it regardless for his tribe and for peace. His shell and soul were used to create and mimic the clover dancers, creating the Cogwork dancer that were used to guard the Cogwork core and the Silk Mother's chamber. The Green Prince could no longer sit on the throne alone. He hated the Citadel even more now, so he decided to go and confront them, but he was captured and caged in the Sinner's Road ever since. Because of his defiance, or maybe because they never intend to keep their promises in the first place, the entire Verdania was destroyed alongside with any creature that lived there, leaving just a small barren set of caves behind. After this act, the Green Prince lost all he loved and just waited for his death, not even wanting to be freed anymore. There is still a thing that puzzles me. His dialogue with Hornet suggests that these lands were destroyed by the Mother, since she is the Pale Being, so part of Verdania could have been destroyed since the conquest time, but I think he refers to the curse the Silk Mother created, and they probably didn't knew what was going on, so they just assumed all of this was because of her. But the main problem was the Weavers and the Citadel, since they were the ones to betray them. These three different factions had a certain song assigned to them, and all of them combined formed the threefold melody that was able to keep the Silk Mother asleep, and it also worked as a seal. In order to ride the elevator for the final ascent, you will have to get all three songs, which was only possible for the Weavers and a few others. With the Citadel built and the religion established, the Weavers used their songs to lure bugs around Pharlom and even from the nearby wasteland to come to the Citadel to produce the songs. A good example would be a group of bugs that lived in the town that lost its name in time that was situated just above the kingdom. All of them had left the town at the songs and promise of the Weavers, except one that eventually died, so the town remained empty with only squirrels remaining around that even to this day are not under the influence of the silk since they lived outside the kingdom. The Weavers probably promised a good and long life, since the wasteland was kinda very dangerous, so for them it looked like a good offer. The Weavers created 5 bell shrines and paths across Pharlom that pilgrims will take to test their devotion, because only the most devoted and sinless were allowed to pass through the gate of the Citadel. After ringing the 5 shrines, the pilgrims will have to go over a final test. Multiple judges were sent in the blasted steps that will judge and test the devotions and sins of the pilgrims, and if you are deemed unworthy, well, the last judge was guarding the door, and as you might guess, not many were able to pass the test. How the judges knew if someone was devoted and sinless? Well, there are a few criterias. I don't remember exactly where I've read this, but at some point the last judge was supposed to let Hornet pass without a fight if she would have never killed a single enemy until that point. But since it requires to do that to reach this place, it was later scrapped. Sharma is a pilgrim that seems quite pure and innocent, and she never met with the last judge, so I guess you need to be like her. Easy, right? Once the pilgrims entered the Citadel, they were given holy clothes and status and would join the Vault Keeper's sermons or the Conductors' choir to keep making songs. Some of them even received different roles, such as guards or guides that will help integrate the new pilgrims into the choir. The majority of the pilgrims carry bells with them that are probably required for this pilgrimage. With all the bells around, the bell heart was built as a rest point for the pilgrims alongside all the beast stations that the creatures like the bell beasts travel around. But this pilgrimage was a very hard task to go through. The starting point was at the bone bottom, and that's the place where most of the pilgrims died. So many in fact that the entire Marrow area, foundation and structures were made from all the husk and bones of the pilgrims that died here. Some of the wild bugs in the area even used their shells for protection and as a disguise from other predators. So while the comfortable and safe life in the Citadel seems good, I bet not even 10% of the pilgrims managed to actually reach that place. The pilgrims and residents also worship and pray to the Weavers. They could use their silk to heal them and cure them of diseases. This is their bind ability. While they did help these bugs in order to keep them devoted and motivated to come to the Citadel and spread the religion around, they might have looked nice at the surface, but in reality, in the best case scenario, they didn't care about the others and just let them suffer in order to keep the Silk Mother asleep, and also so they will still be the rulers of Pharlom. Even if they weren't her daughters, they still shared her nature to desire to be worshipped and rule over others. So, life in the Citadel was actually quite good compared to everything else. But for the other bugs, well, it was a shithole, maybe even worse. Just under the Citadel was the Underworks, a similar place to the Cogwork core, filled with heavy, dangerous machineries, but unlike in the Cogworks core that was maintained by automatons, besides just a few robots that handle some of the tasks, the Citadel sent mostly normal workers that work in some of the worst conditions, even worse than the deep docks. They had to constantly work in small smog from the machines, the workers were tasked to clean and repair the place even though there were many hazardous areas such as lava pits and exposed gears from where rocks and metals could fall on them. There was so much filth here that even their tools were dirty, so it was futile to clean this place. They only just moved the mess around. There were also workers like Loam who had to run endlessly on a treadmill to power up the machines above. The workers barely got any rosaries from their endless work. Even the entire place was built with the intent to exploit these bugs for more work. All the benches around here were built with a mechanism that will fold back the bench after a short time, so you will have to pay again to sit down, and since the bugs had barely any money, they weren't able to take any breaks. There's also a confession room for the workers, but that was also a mechanism that will just tell them to go back to work. The bugs continue to work in this place despite all of this, in hopes that the Citadel will notice their efforts and one day they will be allowed to rise above. But as you might guess, that never happened, and the only good thing that happened to these bugs was when they finally died and they were freed from this life. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, and things do not stop here for the other bugs. All the waste and trash that was made by the Citadel was thrown in the putrefied ducts and Bilewater. The pools and waters were infected with the parasites from the waste that eventually choked the caves and infected the entire area. What was once a set of beautiful caves was now filled with parasites and infection. Because of this, the Silksong tribe raged against the Citadel. They eventually adapted to the infection and used it to craft weapons. They built countless traps all around their home, and they hid inside the infected waters and attacking anyone who dared coming close to their domain. One of the remaining snail shamans thought they had a common enemy and goal, so he wanted to go there and make an alliance with the Silksong. The other snail shamans advised him that was not a good idea, but he still had gone there. Once he arrived in the Bilewater, the shaman was captured and killed by the Silksong, and now they harvest and use his soul abilities. That's why Growl can use attacks such as this. He uses the stolen souls. Despite this elaborate plan and religion that probably lasted for quite a long time, it eventually failed. The Silk Mother still had a bit of her consciousness awake, and she used her ability for what is now known as the curse. She used her silk and attached it to the bugs and pilgrims in Pharlom to take control over them. The curse spread fairly fast in the beginning. The sentinels were tasked to kill all the infected bugs to protect anyone who was not, but the more the curse spread around, the sentinels could no longer take care of this, and all except one that wasn't even functional got destroyed. The sentinels just delayed the inevitable. The Silk Mother commanded all the hunted bugs to go after the weavers to capture them, to make her free, or to kill them as revenge for what they did to her. Since the weavers could control the silk, they weren't affected by the curse, but in time a lot of the bugs in the Citadel became haunted. The mother was connected with all the bugs she controlled, and because of this the weavers had to run and hide from her gaze. One of the weavers took the side of the Silk Mother. This was the widow. But her shell was forcefully removed and pins shoved into her back to take her ability to produce silk. She could only guide and help the silk find its targets. This is also probably the time when the grandmother of silk made Pharlom and Lace. As you can see, there is no clear indication of the timeline here, so a lot of the events might have happened in a different order. One of the things that the Silk Mother always desired was a child, but she was unable to make one. This is a defect that even the weavers inherited from her, so she tried to artificially make a child and having none. Pharlom was the first one that was created. The Silk Mother put her silk into an empty shell and gave birth to Pharlom. But the child had many flaws. Her body was fragile and easily would break and fade. I don't know exactly when Pharlom was created, since she was the one that tasked herself with dumping the waste of the Citadel into the Bilewater and putrefied ducts area. And she is also responsible for the mist area that was made from a combination of steam and silk that was operated from her organ. She didn't want to just wither away and wish to die in battle, so I assume she was made when the mother was still free. But Lace seems to have been made after the curse started to spread, since she was also created with the task to free her. Just like Pharlom, she was also flawed, stuck in the mind and body of a child. Both of them resented their mother for giving them these accursed lives. They cannot even call this alive with all these flaws. They hated it. Now Lace just wanders around the Citadel, keeping it clean and quiet while mortal bugs try to avoid her. I can't blame them. She is a bit of a weirdo after all. After the weavers left the Citadel, they made a few nests and altars hidden deep around Pharlom. These altars were made from a very solid material, and the doors could only be opened with the needling skill that only the weavers possessed. The weavers' altars were safe from the Silk Mother's gaze and influence, but they couldn't remain there forever, so they desperately started to create traps, tools and bindings that will make them free of her permanently. They made paths around Mount Fae and the device at the top to summon and communicate with the Fae form, in the hopes that the creature will grant them a gift that will help them with this task. It looks like they even collaborate with the still sane bugs in the deep docks to make a diving bell to pass through the lava and reach the void. Or probably they did that while they were still the rulers of this place. The void is the natural enemy of the pale beings, so this was their best chance of finding something. They built another weaver altar there where they will study and experiment with the void. They even have records on how the void tendrils are made, or maybe they even managed to replicate this technology and create them using molds. It's not clear if they are the ones that made the tendrils, since we get the journal entry from one of their study desks. But since we have these tendrils in Hallownest and there is no sign of the weavers there, I believe they just learn how to make them as well. But playing with the void is not a task for normal bugs, and the weavers were no different. So they were probably consumed by it before they were able to find anything, or they just abandoned their study because it was too dangerous and the diving bell was never used since. Another method they tried was to create a divine weaver similar to the Silk Mother that they will use to replace her. But as I've said, making a child is close to impossible for them and extremely painful. There was also the problem that all the weavers were females, so they didn't have any suitable mates for such a creature that they wanted to create. But somehow they managed to create one. That was Eva. In the weaver nest Alta, from runes and shell a life was spun, but the child was extremely flawed. She had the rare ability to look into someone's soul and read it, but her life was so fragile that she needed to be placed in an iron chamber, and if she was to be taken out, she would just die. Over time, these differences between them caused the weavers to distance themselves from her. All the weavers' attempts to gain freedom ended up in failure, and the situation got even worse since they didn't have any time left, since the curse spread around the entire Pharlom by this point. Anytime they will step outside of their nests was very dangerous, since so many were after them, so a lot of them died in this expedition, so to say, in the search for a way to get rid of the mother. When everything became desperate, they resorted to a final plan: to fuck off and run as far away from this place as possible. But again, that wasn't easy. They could barely come out of their nest, let alone just to escape the entire kingdom. So not too many managed to leave Pharlom. Many died and many had remained here. The plan was probably to find a way to get rid of the mother from somewhere else. There's a map in one of their nests that shows all the different places the weavers fled to, and one of them was a place that will later become Hallownest. Since there weren't many weavers left and those who still were in Pharlom had to stay hidden, the weavers gave up their throne and rule over these lands to the Conductors, or they just took it from them when everything was messed up. And they mainly used these powers for their own benefits. They are probably the ones responsible for the current look of the Citadel, filled with luxurious architectures ornate with gold everywhere, spa rooms, stages, waterways, and the list just goes on. Their domain, the High Halls, was the most luxurious area of the entire Citadel. They just wanted to live comfortably and they didn't care about the others, or how their action will affect them in the future. Since the curse was targeting the weavers, they were able to take care of it for the most part and just establish their rules and, build all of this stuff. They also had discovered a way to heal and cure them and other bugs of diseases, just like the weavers could do with their bind ability. They found out that by implanting silk into the bug's shells, they could replicate this ability and even prolong their lives. So the White World was created in the deepest level of the Citadel, where the surgeons conducted countless cruel experiments. Many times these experiments went so far that bugs will just die in the process, or they will be taken over by the silk, having their consciousness fading away. This possessed husk will just be thrown away into a pit underneath and left there. And this process continued regardless of this. It also seems that some of the bugs had continued their painful existence and service even after death. When a bug was beyond saving and was close to death, they had another machine machine that will extract their remaining soul and turn them into gleam flies that will be later used for lamps and illumination. We know they are named like this because one of the house decoration is named gleam lights, so you know these are gleam flies. Not to be confused with luma flies that are smaller and also look different, despite being used in the same way. This makes things even more disturbing knowing that they are the ones to help Hornet escape the cage and also the ones that help her navigate around the mist area. They also want to be saved from this cursed silk. By doing this process over countless generations, bugs began to be born with silk already inside their shells. This was good news for the conductors because it will make this process much easier, but in time it was one of the worst things that happened to everyone. The curse spread even faster thanks to this because now the silk mother silk needed only to seek for itself to reach its targets, and since all of them had silk inside their shells, it resulted in everyone easily being hunted and controlled by her. But it will take a bit of time until they would reach that stage. The main two evidence that I have to prove the white word was made by the conductors is the Unravel, the boss of the area that is an amalgamation of the silk and soul of the bugs that were taken over by the silk, that has the shell or armor of the conductors, so some of them visit and use this place for their benefits, and also because the last conductor, the one we have in the game, is very sick and is kept alive only by a mechanism that constantly fills him with silk, like an infusion, that could only had come from the white world. All of this stuff was made so the bugs will be in eternal servitude to them. While songs must be sung, none may flatter. Infirmary, sickness, death, all are banished from our citadel. This was the oath of the white world. They still had to maintain all the songs in the citadel, otherwise the mother would just break free and, you know, kill them and take the throne. The only problem for the conductors and the white world was that this process required a lot of silk, so they didn't have that much and couldn't produce it themselves, unlike the weavers. So they assigned the bugs in Greymorn, which was situated under the citadel, to collect all the silk that fell from there and send it back up. The silk that fall down here was probably from the cursed bugs, but mainly from the silk of the failed experiments in the white world. Many of the bugs there will be burned after their death, and the cold room will just leave the silk in the air for the bugs in the Greymoor to collect. They also had weaver-like constructs that were able to collect the silk from the bugs in the citadel. Bugs such as the drag catcher and the thread raker had to catch and gather the silk. Then the silk snipper will cut and spool the silk before sending it back to the citadel. The middle area of the Greymore was filled with poles to catch even more silk. Just like in the Underworks, the residents of Greymore work endlessly in hopes that one day the citadel will notice their hard labor and allow them into the citadel, but they were never able to see it. There are also creatures such as the Morwing that catch workers who try to flee their task, so it was not like they had many options to begin with, so they could only work. The residents were so obsessed with these endless tasks to the point that they no longer even took care of their basic needs, such as growing food, so a lot of them starved and died. This is probably why there are so many graves around here. But there was someone to take care of that problem. Lugoli was once a chef from the citadel, but he was exiled for repeated culinary crimes, meaning he used some, exotic ingredients in his cooking. So he tasked himself to combat the starving problem. They needed a fast and constant way to produce food, so the solution was something inspired from the Bilewater, which was macro cheese. The macro cheese breed very fast and in large numbers. It's not the best food source, but it's better than starving, I guess. The Sinner's Road was abandoned after the conquest, so it was the perfect breeding area for the macro cheese. The waters and pools in the area were filled and infected with the maggots, and when they will grow, the roaches will be catched and caged by the roach catchers into the now unused cages in the area. Then the roach feeder were the ones to feed the macro cheese. With what, you may ask? There is no food here. Well, with maggot gruel from the waters. It looks like these roaches breed more than they eat, but don't think they were well fed either. They are described as starved bugs with an insatiable appetite. The macroaches were quite dangerous when they were hungry, which was all the time, so the roach keeper were the ones to take care of them. When the macroaches were ready to be consumed, the roach servers and Chef Lugoli will prepare and cook them for everyone in the area to eat and avoid starvation. But things do not stop here. as you can see, no food was wasted here. Even the bugs that have died were put in jars to be cooked for later. And this applies to absolutely everyone. After Hornets defeats Chef Lugoli, you can see how the roach servers will cut and cook Lugoli as well. With so much infection and death around, it became the perfect place for crows and mites to make their nests, and over time they filled this place. Throughout time, slowly but surely the curse spread in the entire kingdom, and bugs were forced to continue this cruel existence and work endlessly even after death, because the silk will just revive them and keep them alive. Everyone became even more mad and obsessed with their task, to the point that they mindlessly did only that. This place became even more worse than the wastelands. You know, the place where many of them had come from to have a better life. But for now, let's go back to the weavers that fled to Hallownest. When the weavers reached the Hallownest, they set up their home in Deepnest. At the time, the Pale King, the future ruler of that place, didn't even arrive yet. The leader of that weaver group was Hera the Beast. There is still no explanation why she looks different from the others. One of the explanations would be that she is a hybrid child of the weavers and not a part of the original weavers made by the Silk Mother. But there is no evidence for that, so I guess she is just special. Hera partnered with the king of Deepnest and she became the queen. But the king later died for some unknown reasons, and the weavers had become the rulers of Deepnest. When a pale being arrived in these lands and wanted to create a kingdom like the Silk Mother, the weavers didn't even want to deal with that, so they rejected him entirely. Eventually the Pale King had come again to make a deal with the weavers. The king needed the weavers' silk seals and Hera to become a dreamer in order to stop the infection that was going on in Hallownest. Stuff is quite fucked up there as well. The weavers and Hera accepted in exchange for what they searched and wished for: a child. Since the Pale King was yet another pale being, just like their mother, he was the perfect mate and the best chance for a weaver to actually make a child. And a powerful one, that is. And they actually made it. Hera gave birth to a daughter, half weaver and half pale being, that will be later named Hornet. The weavers teach Hornet from a very young age how to use her silk ability, to prove more weaver than worm, which was the species of the Pale King. Hornet was the best chance for the weavers to deal with the Silk Mother and to free Pharlom and the weavers that still live there from the curse. The big news even arrived to the weavers that lived in Pharlom. This was their last hope, since the majority of the weavers had been killed by this point. But sadly for them, that day would never come, since all of them will be dead by the point Hornet arrives. Over time they were killed by the hunted bugs sent by the Silk Mother. The only weavers that remained in Pharlom were the widow who sided with the mother, and Eva, who was still in her chamber in the weaver nest Alta. The only thing related to them that remained were their many locked nests, the few constructs they made that still awaited their return, and a couple of shrines probably made in the times they ruled Pharlom, used by the citizens to worship and pray to the weavers. Or are they shrines? You see, when you get near a shrine you can hear a whispering voice. When you interact with them, you can actually communicate with the statue. Daughter of distant land, we who have remained have awaited long. Bind our strength to yours, reclaim the future of our haunted kingdom. It seems that these are not actually statues, but petrified weavers' husks that still contain a bit of their consciousness and power, that Hornet can bind and absorb. They are still alive, they're kinda. The first sinner is the best evidence for that. She is able to break from that petrified state and fight Hornet. My only guess is that the Silk Mother put them in that state, or more likely they did this themselves by tricking everyone believing they are dead, so they could keep a bit of their power to give to Hornet when she will arrive to aid her and help her defeat the Silk Mother and free the kingdom. The Silk Mother also learned about this savior child, probably from the weavers she captured and killed, or maybe her servants eavesdrops on the weavers' conversation and she learned that from them, since she was connected with everyone in the kingdom. The Silk Mother seems to also want this child, probably because of two reasons. The first is that Hornet can actually break her seal and wake her up from her deep slumber. If she would come to these lands, her weaver and pale instincts will make her want to come and confront her in order to replace her, freeing her in the process. This is in their blood and nature. The second reason is probably because Hornet is the child she wished for. She is related to her since she has the ability to make silk and she has the weaver's blood in her. The Silk Mother is the one who created the weavers with her silk after all. But Hornet is also part pale being. In many ways she is just like the Silk Mother, only a smaller version. So she would be just like her daughter. So the Silk Mother sent her servants to find and capture this child and bring her to her. The servants found quite a few weavers' children that were just a quarter or even an 8-part weaver, birthed by the other groups that fled from Pharlom. But none of them were the one that they were looking for. And even if they would have found around Hallownest, that place still had big problems with the infection, so they would just die or be controlled by the Radiants before they could find Hornet. The desire and all the hopes of the Weavers was that Hornet would come and save them and the kingdom, all with the exception of one, and that was her mother Hera. Greater, grander, Weaver, Guardian, Queen. Those are their desire, not your own, certainly not mine. She wanted Hornet to not be shackled by the will of others, to be her own self and to resist the Weaver's nature, so maybe she will find another hope. Sadly, Hornet didn't manage to spend too much time with her, since her mother had to become a dreamer soon and go eternally to sleep. For the time being, Hornet, not even knowing Pharlom or her Weaver roots, decided that her will is to protect and save her home from the infection that was going on. She trained her fighting skills with the Hive Queen Vespa. This is where she got the name Hornet despite being a spider. She was also raised by the White Lady at the White Palace, since she was a daughter of the Pale King. The White Lady gave Hornet a similar task like her mother, about surpassing her own nature and finding another hope for a better future, since both kingdoms ended up in ruins. Because of the ongoing infections that seems to have no cure, the remaining Weavers in Hallownest thought it was a good idea to go back to their original home. I mean, it was either the Radiance infection or the Silk Mother hunting. I would have chosen the infection since that is not specifically targeting them, but I'm not a Weaver, so what do I know? And it seems that would have been the better option because all the Weavers either died during the trip back home or they were killed the moment they arrived there, since there are no Weavers left. And also because the kingdom of Hallownest was eventually cured from the infection by one of the Pale King offsprings, with a bit of help from Hornet. But now the place was mostly empty and in rubbles, so now Hornet was probably helping with the reconstruction and repopulation of her home. At some point, eventually the bugs of Pharlom finally managed to track her down, and with the special cages they managed to capture her and bring her back to Pharlom. And this is where the events of the game finally begins. Since I assume you played the game and finish it, right? I will move rather quickly over this part. When Hornet arrives at the kingdom's entry, a special butterfly breaks the seal of Hornet's cage and she is able to break free from it. But the seal took a lot of her strength, so throughout the game she will have to regain her power and abilities from the Weaver's husk she can find around Pharlom. Hornet seems to be intrigued by the curse around his lands and she decided to seek its source. And even if she would try to escape, the hunted bugs will just come back after her, so she really needs to deal with whatever is going on here. Around this journey, Hornet meets with Lace. Lace seems to be the one that actually helped Hornet escape, and she wants her to go away because she doesn't want her mother to get what she wanted. Like I said, Lace hates the life her mother granted, and she is also jealous because her mother only thinks about Hornet, and Lace probably can tell that Hornet is the child the Silk Mother really wished for and not her. Hornet defeats Lace and manages to ring the 5 bells around Pharlom and open the door to the Citadel. But before she could meet the Silk Mother, she had to activate the elevator by singing 3 songs, one from the Conductors, one from the Vault Keepers and one from the Architects. The Architect songs could be activated from a machine they built. The last Conductor was able to give Hornet the song despite being very sick, and the Pontiff that had the last song was unfortunately dead, but luckily for Hornet there was a recording of that song, so she takes it from there. With all the 3 songs, Hornet manages to activate the elevator, and at the end she meets again with Lace, who have awaited for a rematch between them, and Hornet emerges victorious from that encounter. So now the final confrontation with the Silk Mother could start. From this point onward you can do a variety of endings, and some of them even reference endings from the first game. So if you haven't played that game yet, well, I'm sorry and all, but you had plenty of time to do that, so sucks to be you, I guess. Just watch my videos on it, you'll get everything you need from there. The first ending is just killing and biting the Silk Mother. In this ending, Hornet just obeys her Pale and Weaver natures and desire and becomes the new monarch. The silk spreads throughout Pharlom even more now, and Hornet seems to go through some metamorphosis, becoming a full Weaver. You can even see her health transforming into Weaver's mask once she binds all the silk of the Silk Mother. She becomes a full Weaver now, or she becomes just like the Silk Mother since she also got 6 arms. As you can guess, this is not a very good ending. Even her 2 mothers said that this is not the way to do it. So the next ending involves the remaining snail shamans. Hornet can meet the last snail shamans disguised as regular bugs. The caretaker caretaker is found at the last bell shrine in the Citadel, and he tells Hornet that he actually has a plan to get rid of the mother. What if instead of having Hornet to just bind her and take her place, continuing the cursing, they would actually eliminate her permanently? This is what the snail shamans research and work for all these years, and it looks like Hornet is the one that would be able to actually do this. Using 3 soul items from each snail shaman and an old tool made by the weavers that can channel that power, the caretaker can make a trap for the mother that Hornet will activate it once she is weakened enough. But turns out that the caretaker also bound the trap with the void, and a portal to the depths of the abyss was opened. Wow, an item made by the snail shaman had void in it. Who saw that coming? Even Hornet knew that, but she just ignored it or hoped that will never happen. The trap was actually very efficient since the void is the natural enemy of the pale beings and godlike beings. In old fashion, the abyss is used as a dumb place to throw higher beings that control everyone. The Silk Mother was dragged down by the void tentacles, but she grabs Hornet to take her down as well. Luckily for Hornet, Lace comes and frees her from her mother, but both of them are dragged into the void in that process. Lace did this as revenge. She wanted to deny her mother's wish and see her down. The cradle got destroyed from the shockwave and Hornet was knocked down. This is considered to be an ending, but in reality this is just the start of the Act 3, the final act of the game. The portal had bring the Silk Mother and Lace in the depths of the Void Lake. It turns out that the Silk Mother actually really cared about her daughter, despite not showing it. With her last remaining silk and powers, she created a giant cocoon around them to slow the void entering and corrupting Lace. The more the void consumed the cocoon, she will just create a new layer, but this process drained her life force, and eventually both of them would be consumed by the void. This was the last desperate attempt to protect her daughter. In this process, her silk thread spreads from the cocoon throughout the kingdom, and because the silk passed through the void lake above, all the threads were corrupted by the void. So now not only the bugs of Pharlom are haunted by the silk, but they were also corrupted by the void. If this situation goes for too long, the entire kingdom will be eventually destroyed alongside everyone who lives there, and Hornet wants to stop that. She confronted the snail shamans for what happened, and even they are quite surprised the Silk Mother put so much fight against the void. Now Hornet has to go to the abyss to check the situation and to see the Silk Mother's location. But it turns out that Hornet cannot dive into the lake because she would just be consumed by it, since she's not made of void, as all of you probably already know. So she goes back to talk with the snail shamans. Hornet actually knows a way to pass through the lake, using the delicate flower or Everbloom. This flower is described as the first light and is forever linked to the pale beings. It has the power to repel and protect the user from the void. Sadly, Pharlom seems to not have this kind of flower, and even if they would do, the flower needs to be at full power for this to work, and the only place they could get the flower from is from one of Hornet's memories, when the White Ladies show it to her. But even the snail shamans do not possess the power to enter in a weaver's mind, especially a pale one, so they would need 3 powerful items from the old rulers of this place. But since they are all dead or in a decayed state, she will have to enter in their memories and fight them at their peak and collect their hearts. Besides Carmelita, Khan and Nylet, Hornet can actually get an optional one. If she frees the Green Prince from the Sinner's Road cage, he will take the remains of the Cogwar Dancer, since they were made from his lover's soul, and bring it back to what remains of Verdania. Hornet can enter in his memory and witness this beautiful area and take their hearts as well. With all the hearts collected, the shamans managed to take Hornet deep inside her memory and take the flower from there. But this process took so much of their power that they all died. With the flower, Hornet goes back into the abyss and enters in the cocoon, but she was a bit too late since Lace was already corrupted. But there is still a chance to save her, and that's by beating her ass until all the voids goes away. Hornet is pretty raw. Throughout the fight, the mother starts to lose her strength and even more void starts to enter into the cocoon. But Hornet manages to save Lace just in time before the void took all of them. For the last dive, she asks for the last remaining power of the Silk Mother. Hornet and Lace escapes and the Silk Mother is consumed by the void. But even with all that power, it still wasn't enough. And also big problems, the flower could no longer protect them from so much void and it eventually got destroyed. The void tentacles goes to take them, but then the best moment in the game happens and Hornet is saved by the knight and all the vessels that probably traveled between the voids and arrived here just in time. Or maybe the knight has the power to appear anywhere where the void is found, since we also see glimpses of the Lord of Shades. If you don't know the Hollow Knight lore, this part might be a bit confusing, but explaining it would mean talking a lot about the story from the first game, so just again watch one of these videos. The knight brings Hornet and Lace at the surface, and both of them looks to have left the kingdom together or lived together or something, since we see both of their weapons together in the wastelands in the title screen you get after this ending. Pharlom was freed from the curse and the void, and its residents are finally free. Hopefully also free from the terrible work they had to do until now. But there are two more endings that you can get. One involves a parasite linked to the Grey Root. This parasite seems to be a powerful being that wants to be reborn. For that he needs a powerful host, so Grey Root implants the child inside Hornet. The parasite is so powerful that not even Hornet can cure it herself, like with the other infections. If you choose to fight the Silk Mother while still infected, when both the Mother and Hornet are weakened from the fight, the parasite will actually infect both of them and cover the entire area in roots. And from their corpses, a horror that I cannot even describe is born. So in the name of all holy bugs, please do not do this ending, is just horrible, it's straight up from a Lovecraft story. The final one, you cannot actually get it unless you play with the game's code. It seems to be a cut ending or something that Team Cherry probably forgot to remove it. In this ending, the Silk Mother got everything she wanted. The curse is even worse now because her abilities are even more powerful now, and she can reach with her silk and attach it to bugs even in the wastelands around Pharlom. Her powers are much greater now. She also looks to be a combination between her and Hornet based on her new appearance. But don't worry, that's not canon, and the true ending of the game seems to be the one Hornet probably goes back to Hallownest with Lace, or I don't know, do whatever. Maybe they will eventually be a couple. It's canon that Hornet had many boyfriends or girlfriends before, but they all died before her, so I guess Lace could be the perfect partner. And with that, we finally reached the end of the main story of Silksong. If you have a different interpretation of these events or you think I was wrong about something, you can let me know in the comment section. As you can see from my past videos, I've read and respond to most of them. There are also lots of stuff that I haven't even mentioned in this video, like the story of many bosses, all the NPCs, lifeblood, and the list is too big to mention everything here. So if you enjoyed this oversized video and you are still hungry for more Silksong lore, like and subscribe for more content like this. If there is anything to take from this probably 1 hour long video, you should really know that even here in Pharlom, girls are not safe from perverts, so be aware where you take your baths.